Okay.
We'll start there. All right, there we go. First things first, name and title.
Katie Rosenberg, Mayor of Wausau.
All right, so Mayor Rosenberg, there's been I don't know if you call it, rumor, there's been discussion at certain meetings about the possibility of another, or some people think we may need another hike in the water rates. So to cover
Concerns
staffing, there
concerns
we
by
go.
certain folks.
Yes,
Yeah,
concerns by certain folks. So as mayor and chair of the Waterworks Commission, tell us
yeah.
where this is coming from and what kind of appetite do you think there is for it now?
Yeah. So first of all, we had a pretty intense discussion at our during our budget meeting, and you probably recall this, where we talked a lot about the payment in lieu of tax payment that the utility makes to the city of Wausau. And that's a little more than $1 million, I want to say. And so I would say the discussion kind of started there. And we all kind of came to a consensus. And actually, I just signed a resolution that included in it that we would do more of a financial health kind of investigation that we could present to council by August of 2024. And that is to look at are we okay, both city budget and utility budget, without this pilot payment, is what we call it. And so that was getting going. You know, we did just do a rate case in 24, and that was huge. It was a very hefty lift, and we're hearing from all kinds of folks that it is a heavy lift. And so we're not currently engaging in any rate case. And I would say this discussion probably got started during that council meeting where we talked about the rates, we talked about that pilot payment, we talked about a variety of different things. And regularly, if you watch our utility meetings, you will see staff talking about salaries and things like that. I pushed that over to the HR committee, the city's HR committee, so that that discussion could happen there. And I know that they're either in the process of scheduling or have already scheduled a meeting where it would be a joint utility and human resources committee meeting where we would discuss more of this. So, I would like all of our city employees to be treated equally. I think that's really important. And while the utility is kind of a standalone statutorily, it's not a standalone as it relates to our city employees. So that's kind of where we're at here. There will be some discussion. There's a joint meeting that's we're getting ready to have. But there's no rate case in the works, and that would have to happen in order for us to pursue any kind of increase, decrease, whatever that looks like.
And that would also have to happen 1 year after the current increase has been implemented too. Is that correct?
I guess that's probably a statutory thing that you're quoting, and I don't have that memorized, but I'm gonna assume you're correct on that one. And just I'm not super interested in going to the ratepayers again so soon to ask for anything really. And obviously, as you know, we're engaged in a handful of litigation opportunities for us to recover some of those costs. So there's a couple of things that we want to get under into our hands. We want to understand, after a full year of our new drinking water treatment facility being online, what are the costs? We want to understand where are the gaps in our employees and what do they need. We want to understand kind of the culture. So there's a couple of things that we need to analyze before any kind of rate case could even be considered. And also, there's a lot of interest in the potential dollars that we would get from any settlement as it relates to PFAS. So we want to make sure that we are looking at that in the right frame of reference here. We want to make sure that we're using that money appropriately, because our community has invested a lot in this drinking water treatment facility and also the PFAS solution.
So just to be clear, right now, you would say there is absolutely no appetite on your end for another increase at this time.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm being honest, I have told people because I'm out and about, and they ask me about this, and I said, I at this point would rather light myself on fire than engage in this right now. And I understand that there's probably going to be a point at which we're talking about this again, but I am not interested in doing this anytime soon. And I also think that this is a discussion that is larger than the utility. Because, when people are upset about a city service, they're not necessarily contacting the utility, they're contacting their elected representatives. And so it's important that we also have that discussion at the council level, which I understand gets a little bit different sometimes. We have all kinds of different people and of varying degrees of interest and also information. So it's important that we have a long conversation about this.
If I may, not and not to name names because I was reading back through the many articles that have been published at this point
Sure.
since this whole thing got started. I guess to my understanding, it was some confusion over how staff members at the water treatment plant were going to be paid. Is that correct? That's how this whole thing got started.
Right. So there is so the council is responsible for approving any funding as it relates to our utility. But the utility can authorize a variety of things, and it's engaged in the statutes. So I think probably, and we had a couple of different staffing discussions at our budget hearing, all 6 of them. And so HR had a crack at some of these jobs and, increases in wages and stuff. But they didn't have a crack at this yet. And that's because they were waiting to have that joint meeting. So I can understand like all of this stuff. It would be great if we could have it happen simultaneously. But we haven't, we haven't done it simultaneously. And I think it also points out some of the, kind of governmental, issues as it relates to having a separate utility, versus a council. Because I think there are maybe even most of our council members are interested in having more of a say in this utility. And that's something we've been talking about. Is this something we'd like to, have as a committee of the council instead of a separate utility? I think that's a discussion worth having. We've talked about it a handful of times. So I think maybe we got to get serious and have that discussion.
Just to follow up with that, and this one's more clarification, so I understand
Sure.
the information. The were the talks centered around future hires or people who are currently working there and need to be paid?
Yeah, so there were a couple of talks, and I'm trying to figure out which one is specifically the budget was kind of working through. So some of it had to do with raises for utility workers who currently work there. But then, there was kind of I don't know what to call it. It was a study by Baker Tilly where they kind of looked through what jobs are currently in uh, which jobs are at the utility and if there need to be more jobs. And so I think that's the discussion that the joint meeting will address. But I'm guessing that all of this kind of will get bundled up as it relates to human resources discussions. So, we need to have everybody kind of aligned in these discussions. And it's too bad we're having them kind of separately, but that's government and politics and all of it. And as you know, we're in that season.
All right, Mike, I think that's everything that I had.
Yeah. Unless there's anything that you want to add about this, I'm out as well.
Yeah. I'm sure you're going to use the part about me wanting to light myself on fire.
Well, I mean, it speaks for itself. It's a great
Right.
I mean,
topic.
truly though, like having a
Headline.
discussion like that right now would be, I can't even imagine. Like, who would voluntarily do that ever? I mean, all I'm hearing about is water rates, and I get it. It's huge, and some people have, things that they're finding, leaks, and they didn't realize that watering their lawn would do something. So, it's taking us all a little bit of time to figure out where we are on this, and we don't even have a full year of operating expenses for this new drinking water treatment facility. So anything we do would be premature.
So I'm guessing then you want to have this discussion right now to make sure everything at the plant is where it needs to be and make sure that and wait until we find out what we're getting from some of these lawsuits before we even consider adding staff at the plants then.
Yeah, I think we need to hear from staff, where are the gaps that they're seeing. Obviously, we need to hear from them. But when it comes, I mean, that's why we have human resources. That's why we have a human resources committee to kind of analyze that gap, or, analyze the pay. So that's important that we have those discussions. And I think, the biggest thing is having a plan, and staff knowing that there's a plan and council knowing that there's a plan. I don't know what that looks like, but we definitely need to analyze the finances here because it's a big part of the discussion as it relates to just home budgeting, right? I mean, that's a big part of why people are kind of upset to be hearing there could be another rate increase, right? And and even though there's not anything currently going forward, even the idea that somebody could think that is alarming to people who are now just kind of getting settled with their current, payments and bills. So I totally get it. But we're not ready to like move forward with a case like that at all. So we need a lot more data.
It's kind of like crying, shouting smoke in a crowded theater.
Yeah,
Or
but you
fire,
know what?
excuse
It's
me.
also good. It's good to hear from people, right? Like sometimes it takes an issue like this to hear more from people, and I'm here for it, right? I mean, we do need to hear from folks.
Perfect. Thanks, Katie. I appreciate it, Mike. I think that's
Yeah,
everything that I
I
have.
think that's everything. Unless
All right,
again,
cool.
there's something else that we haven't asked that you want to add.
Ooh, what do I want to add? No, we're good.
All
What's
right.
what's the, I guess my last question, more
Oh,
so just for planning purposes, when
yeah.
can we expect to see you guys in court with all the
Oh
PFAS
yeah.
So
people, the
I'm super intrigued.
60 something PFAS people?
Right, right. So we kind of have a timeline for the multi-district litigation, which was what we signed on to in June. So we're expecting more about that in February, I think. But who knows? I don't like these cases. We have a general schedule, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we got to negotiate again. But as it relates to the Marathon County case, I'm not sure. So I was kind of looking back at Eau Claire, who did something similar, and they kind of sat around for a little bit. They filed, and then it was punted to the federal court. So I'm not sure if that's what's going to happen here. The big thing I see is that we're kind of interestingly situated with all of our wells contaminated. So we do have a little bit more of a case locally, just based on that. We are different from every utility in the state. And I think it's worth their effort to kind of parse through the information that we submitted. I know it was assigned to Judge Strasser, who does have some civil litigation experience. So it's kind of an interesting thing, but haven't heard yet. I know that if you're covering courts, you know that this stuff is, um, they're dealing with a lot. So,
Oh yeah,
so I'm
tell me about it.
excited to hear more, but maybe excited's the wrong word. Impatient is another word I would use.
You're antsy. You want to hear
Antsy,
more.
yeah. So whenever they want us and need us, I will be running down to the courthouse.
There you go.
All right. Perfect.
Yep.
I will stop
Recording in
right
Yep.
there.
I'm trying to tell my daughter.
Perfect.